Hello. To the small number of Russian viewers out there, I say, "С Новым годом!" Hello from the сумасшедший американский дурак. By the way, there's this beautiful украинская девушка с синими глазами. Охуительная. If you understand Russian, that was intense. Man, there's just a Ukrainian girl at the mall. She's got not blonde hair, but platinum blonde hair. And man, whew, hot. As the Russians would say, luxe. There's something about Ukrainian chicks. I digress. She is tough, though. She's tough. The only thing she's missing is like a leather corset and like a sword in one hand and like some leather boots and cruising across the Baltic Sea on a Viking ship. Someone should cast her in. Yeah, I really digress. Yeah, it's because it's a new year. Excuse my Russian digression there. I always like to ruminate. Sometimes I dream in Russian, which is really strange. Not really. I used to dream in Russian all the time. Favorite cameras of all time to me. Now this is my video. It's not your video. The cameras, the four cameras, and there's really five here, but two of them are one and the same thing. Four cameras that have made me the most happy, one of which I waited 10 years for. And one camera was a progression that evolved into another. And also to two others that are still absolutely incredible. One of them is not that great of a value, so let's get into it, and this is in no particular order. I did have a couple XT2s, but my buddy grabbed my other XT2. And here it is. This one's got a lot of mileage on it. Why did I black out the Fujifilm on this? Because it was a snowy January day, like a year ago or something, and I just thought I wanted to black out my Fujifilm XT2. No particular reason, but my God, what an incredible camera. I mean, anybody that has this knows how incredible it is. Like I said, these four cameras, essentially four cameras, are in no particular order of importance one way or the other. And obviously to progression into the XT3. People wondered about, well, since this one's made in China, this one's made in Japan, has there been any diminution as far as quality or build construction? And the answer is no. The components are actually still from the same place. The only thing as far as people need to see the difference between assembled in China and made in China, all the component level stuff like the main board and the sensor, all from still the same place. I mean, Sony sensor, main board, all the dials, the LCD screen, just to save on a little bit on and it kept the price really low at $1,500, a lot cheaper than the XT2 when it came out. Also knew that Fujifilm was gearing up for the production of this other camera, and it's an established fact that Fujifilm production facilities in Japan are not enormous, and the sales of Fujifilm stuff has been going through the roof, all indications are so. But yeah, anyway, the XT2 and the XT3, consider one camera. One is just an evolution of the other. Essentially, they are the same camera, obviously, with all the additional continuous autofocus, high autofocus, video performance, and whatnot, but essentially the same camera, but not at the level of specification. But as meant, they are one entity. I've been so incredibly happy. That's the reason why I never put the XT3 into one of my Pelican cases, because I always grab for it. I just leave it on the table here, and I head out the door with the XT2. Well, in this case now the XT3, excuse me. So used to saying XT2. The next camera, and this is the Renaissance, which, by the way, the company that made this sensor is Renaissance, which unfortunately has been acquired by Sony. But at the time, it was not a Sony company. Not that that really changes anything. Renaissance sensor output with the huge pixel... Well, nearly impossible to clip the highlights on this camera. It's not entirely correct, but the Nikon D4. I can't declare this a top value by any means. The average going price on a good one that hasn't had the hell ragged out of it is still $1,500. A much better value would be a Nikon D810, which averages about $1,200. And of course you have a lot of megapixels for croppability. And it's not a sports action wildlife camera, the Nikon D810. But the D4 has an output that anybody that owns a Nikon D4, it's in the same league, however we're talking about 16 megapixels versus 12. The Nikon D700 also only has one card slot, which makes it slightly less than professional, but no big deal. In the same league with the stellar output of the Nikon D700. Just absolutely incredible. The Nikon D4 is just, for portraiture, if you're going to frame it right so that you're not cropping, 16 megapixels, by the way, is way more than enough. Everybody today has turned into a megapixel slut. Don't take that personally. Nikon D4 is right at the top rung. If anybody that's, and I've owned every professional Nikon DSLR made. I didn't purchase the Nikon D5. I had the chance to use it 4 times, completely unimpressed. It's being replaced by the Nikon D6 here next year. I know they're going to announce it in the first part of next year, but I don't know when it's going to drop, nor do I have any specifics on the Nikon D6. But the Nikon D4 is just unbelievably incredible. This is number 2, not in any order of number 2, but my number 2 pick for best camera ever made. I got a love affair with the Nikon D4. I got a couple of these, by the way. It's hard to find a good one that hasn't had the hell ragged out of it. Most of them are upwards of 200 to 400,000 clicks. Shutter replacement, by the way, is $600, most of which is labor. There's a lot of labor to get to the shutter mech for replacement. It's a $150 replacement part, but we're talking about a lot of labor and a lot of screws to reach the shutter mech. So if people want to know why the hell the shutter replacement costs so much, it's not the parts, it's the labor. It's kind of like the head gasket on a BMW. It's like a $50 part, but the job to replace the head gasket is like $2,000 or more. Depends on the engine. It's like $4,000 to replace a $50 part. It's because it takes a zillion hours to reach the head gasket. I shouldn't have left this on here. My favorite little things, by the way, are these Black Rapid fasteners, but they're spelled fasten R with a big R. Here's the other one, and by the way, this is a Nikon D500 filming my ugly face right now. This is my other Nikon D500. Still right at the top of the rung. The only issue the Nikon D500 has is that it will clip highlights somewhat easily. The dynamic range is a bit less, but I mean, you just talk about shooting until the XQD card slot is full. Nikon D500 has been, and by the way, I was the first person to review this damn camera on YouTube. I beat everybody else by days. And a lot of people, like hundreds of people, man, they rode me into the dirt. It's telling me I was so full of shit about this camera. I'll never forget that. And they're eating crow right now because everything I said about this camera came to pass and then some. I said this would be a legendary camera for Nikon. Everybody said, no, you're full of shit. It's an expensive $2,000 crop sensor camera. I said, no, you're not listening to me. You know, I don't sell anything. I don't have any affiliate links. You better listen to me. I said, this camera is going to sell like hotcakes. They're going to sell the epic shit out of the Nikon D500. Every wildlife and action photographer is going to buy this. And they still do. Nikon D500 is just effing incredible. Bar none. What a hell of a camera. Nikon D850 has not replaced it. Why? It has the same pixel pitch, even though it's a full-frame sensor. You scale it up, it's the same pixel pitch. In other words, if it's the same pixel density on a D500 scaled up, it would be the same as on a Nikon D850. However, this is a BSI sensor. The Nikon D500 is not. But the Nikon D850 does not have the buffer depth of the Nikon D500. One advantage, and I never hear people talking about this, but on DSLRs, since the autofocus sensor in the bay, which is reflecting off the secondary mirror, the primary mirror that you look at, is semi-translucent. It hits the secondary mirror, which bounces the light down into the autofocus bay and into the sensor, which calculates correct autofocus. But the sensor coverage for sports action, especially wildlife, has much fuller coverage of the sensor than a D850, which is the same sensor size, but it's covering a larger sensor, corner to corner, side to side, top to bottom. Therefore, you have a lower hit rate and more of an issue with continual autofocus tracking for sports, action, and wildlife on a D850. So it doesn't have the buffer depth, and it doesn't have the autofocus point size, breadth to cover the full frame sensor. This is one advantage of DSLR crop sensors. Nobody talks about this. Most people don't understand it, or they just don't know. But Nikon D500 is just effing incredible. So this is number 3. Like I said, once again, not in any particular order. This is not like this was number 1, best. No particular order here. Camera that I've been waiting 10 years for, over 10 years, is an affordable, and it's the same sensor and image engine as its brother, which I also happen to have, and I have every lens made for this camera. It's a GFX 50R. Holy shit, I was the first person on YouTube to review it. I had this camera for about 10 days before everybody else was able to get their sticky fingers on it, other than like a very, very small handful of beta testers who are very close to Fujifilm. So I was able to test the bejesus out of this camera before it hit the shelves. So glad I did. Been waiting forever for it. Then a Fujifilm GFX 50R medium format, 51 megapixel. By the way, I want to make an important analogy. When people say there's an old sensor in this camera, they're both correct and also full of shit. And this is, they are correct that it is an old sensor, because the same sensor is found in the GFX, Pentax 645. It's the same sensor found in the Mamiya Leaf Credo and a few other cameras. So they are correct that it's an old sensor, but why they're full of shit is the same reason it will be looked upon in years hence. The same reason why the Nikon D4 is still, like, you've got all the money in the world. It's like, I buy whatever I want. D5, Nikon D8, I could buy a pile of, not meaning me. And if someone says I could buy a pile of Nikon D850s. Why do people that know what this camera does and output still lust after this camera? It's because the output is just effing incredible. It is that super sweet point of sensor SNR, signal to noise ratio. In other words, it's 16 megapixel full frame sensor with huge ass eyeballs on it, which makes it not impossible, but hard to clip the highlights on the Nikon D4. And the tonality is crotch melting effing perfection. Let me repeat that, crotch melting perfection. There is nobody that will disagree with me on that. Everybody that's owned like most of the Nikon Pro DSLR, like, yep, that fat tattooed guy, I don't like him, but he's dead on. He's 100% accurate. And I am accurate. In the years to come, of course, we know that Fujifilm's got the 100 megapixel GFX, the same sensor size, but basically twice as many megapixels. This too is also where megapixels don't equal megapixels. People don't understand this. Like, what's the difference between 24 megapixel crop sensor, for example, and 24 megapixel on a full frame sensor? It's not the fact that it's a full frame sensor, it's the fact that you're actually able to stick as many megapixels on a larger sensor and has bigger eyeballs. So you see, larger sensors don't gather more light. Exposure is per unit area. Native SNR, signal to noise ratio per aperture per unit of time is much superior for better tonality, less highlight clipping on a larger sensor. But it has nothing to do with the sensor size. It has to do with how large and how large you could stick the eyeballs or the photo sites on that particular sensor. This is where, for example, the Nikon D810, for example. Nikon D810. Excuse me, hello. Wake up, McFly. Nikon D850 at 45 plus megapixels, which I have that camera. Not too far from 51. Well, this is a 51 megapixel camera. Yeah, but it's a much larger sensor. So what's the difference? Both of them are basically 50 megapixels, right? What the hell's the difference? Well, the difference is this is 50 megapixels of larger eyeballs with better SNR, signal to noise ratio, per aperture, per unit of time. That is the true exposure triangle of digital photography. ISO is not part of exposure in digital photography. Look up ISO invariance if you don't believe me. True exposure triangle is SNR, gain, and time. Gain being aperture, time, of course, being shutter speed. But this will be looked upon in years hence as equivalent to That's good news for anybody that owns a current GFX or GFX 50R. It will be looked upon as the renaissance of a sensor output. I will not be proven wrong on this. I will be proven 100% correct. People will remember the days and lust after the GFX 50S and 50R years hence like they currently lust. That's the reason why the Nikon D4 is still so goddamn expensive. Because people that know, like, they know the output of that camera. That's the reason why it's still pretty damn expensive. Average is like $1,500 to $1,700. A lot higher if it has relatively low shutter count. The average on that one is $1,800, $1,900. Most of the ones at $1,500 to $1,700 have had the hell ragged out of them. But these are my picks for the cameras that have made me most happy in life. Like I said, I have no affiliate links. I don't sell anything. And, yeah. Nikon D500, so I was proven 100% accurate on. See, if you're like the 10th person to review something, then whatever you say is not really, it's like, well, I said so and so. Yeah, but you already had 10 people before you say the same thing. Kind of the same way it's kind of pissed me off. A lot of people are saying, so-and-so said, this pisses me off a little bit. So-and-so said that this is the camera of the year, the Fujifilm X-T3. I'm like, yeah, that's wonderful. I was the first person to say that. Like 3 months before anybody else did. Hello, 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 hello. Yeah. Do I need to point out that obvious fact? I guess I do, since I just said it, and I thought it was important to say. This is the point where someone's going to leave me a rude comment and go, you're an asshole, I don't like you. So, yeah. You know what? I don't sell anything, and, yeah, I'm trying to be helpful. You can't have it all, right? You can either have someone that smiles at you like, hi, how are you doing? Please click the subscribe button. We love you. And then they lie to you. And then they've got a bunch of Trojan horse affiliate link. Please click the link below. Yay! You know, the people that smile to you and like kiss your butt and blow smoke up your skirt, these are the people that in reality, and I've been contacted by some of them, are assholes. These are the real assholes, not people like me that are a little bit salty and crusty on the surface, because I'm not selling anything. Anyway, I want to make this video because it's a year ending 2018. Nikon D500 is still as relevant as it ever was. Now, even though I've given endless praise to the Nikon D4, for portraiture and landscape, the Nikon D810 is a far superior value. Got a lot more megapixels, a lot more croppability, and the average price on a good used one, most of them have not had the hell ragged out of them with a bazillion clicks on them, is a Nikon D810 for $1,100 to $1,200. Like I said, even one of these for $1,600, you're still getting one that's had the crap kicked out of it. It's been treated like a redheaded stepchild. So D810 is a much better value. But if we throw money to the wind and we forget about money, D4 Nikon. Why not a D4S? Because the Nikon D4S is only about that much better, but it costs that much more. Nikon D4S is ridiculously priced. It's like, how much better is the Nikon D4S as opposed to the Nikon D4? It's about that much better, and the price difference is about that much. That's why I say, to hell with the Nikon D4S. Not because it's not awesome, but because the value sucks dead bunny rabbits. Sucks dead bunny rabbits. Yeah, absolutely. So, Fujifilm, by the way, won 2018. What do they mean they won? Well, Nikon's been hyping and hyping like a carnival barker about their frigging Z6 and Z7 for years, and it's their 100th anniversary, and then they brought out two turd muffin cameras that are, one of them is horribly overpriced and far inferior to the Nikon D850. It's only got one card slot! Assholes. Yeah, Nikon, you screwed the pooch this year. You kind of screwed the pooch last year. Well, last year you didn't do anything. What the hell did you do last year? Well, the Nikon D850 earlier last year, but which is an incredible camera. Now you might say, well, the D850 is so incredible. Why didn't you? People ask me, why didn't you include the Nikon D850 in this video? D850 is incredible. I have a D850. It's all that in a bag of chips, but it does not reach this video for me because it is not at the top, upper, topmost plateau or echelon of cameras that are, well, let's just put it nicely, crotch melting perfection. Nikon D850 is really right there. You know, is it a better performer than a Nikon D4? Sure as hell is. Doesn't have the dynamic range, the tonality of the Nikon D4 though. No, it does not. And by the way, the files are enormous. The files on the Nikon D850 are as big, exactly the same size by the way, as those from the Fujifilm GFX. So yeah, so this is my pick for the 4 cameras that have made me, the professional cameras, that have made me most happy in life. And I hate everything. To make me happy is really hard. So once again, to my Russian friends, Może żena, увидимся с Новым годом, до свидания. And keep on the lookout for tall, platinum blonde Ukrainian chicks. She's named, I better not tell you her name. You might look her up and be like, you'll call her up and go, there's this tattooed guy talking about you on YouTube. One with tattoos, fat. She'll be like, oh yeah, I know who that is. Yeah, I saw her again today. No, I don't have a crush on her. It's just something about украинская девушка. Yeah, украинская девушка с синими глазами. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm ruminating in Russian. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you like these videos. If you do, you can click the link below. Tell me to jump off a cliff. Whatever makes you happy. Whatever tickles your pickle. Whatever pets your worm. Whatever. Don't drink and drive on New Year's Eve, okay? I hate alcohol personally. It makes me sick. But whatever you do, don't get drunk and drive drunk and end up killing someone else or yourself or both people, you know. Don't do that shit. Happy New Year. Увидимся. Bye.